Hello folks, this is Sullla once again. Welcome to another patch review. This is the big, long-awaited patch. This is essentially the beginning of Season 4 preseason, whatever you want to call it. It still has the number 3 on it, patch 3.14, but make no mistake, this is really the beginning of the big and sweeping changes that are coming for Season 4. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as I can, but this is an absolutely massive patch, and it's going to take some time. You can look at all this stuff that's just listed here at the beginning. So we'll try to run through, talk about some of the changes, the biggest ones being to the changes to the jungle, changes to the supports, and the new trinket system. So it's a humongous patch, and let's just go ahead and dive right in. All right, general PvP updates. They fiddled with the client, so you can do things like suppress notification pop-ups, mass dismiss notifications. That's good. Rework the friends list. I'm going to have to take a look at this. I have not logged into the client yet to see what this looks like. Overhauled the way notifications work. So I don't know if that's better or not. They said they've redone group chats. That's good, I suppose. Your skin selection will now lock in place a few moments before you enter the loading screen. So now you have to get your skin picked faster. Okay, anyway, I have not had a chance to test this yet, so I'll have to look at this and see if it's better. I'm assuming it's improved. They did make some changes to the in-game UI, that's user interface for the curious. Health bars give vital information. They've changed basically what the health bar looks like. They've updated them. They now look different. Well, I don't know if I can find a screenshot of that, but they've changed what they look like in game. They are more look like squares right now. It's like there's a square for every 100 hit points, basically like that. They've also updated the champion health bars. Now glow when the character's highlighted. They also updated the smite icon and what it looks like in game. A big thing now is your health bar is now gold in game, and I actually like this change a lot. There were some user created interface mods that used to do this, change your health bar to gold. So basically your health bar is gold. I think your allied teammates are blue, I think, and then enemies are in red. This is actually really nice. I know I would often lose track of my character in the middle of a huge team fight. It was just hard to see where you're located at times. I mean, maybe people who play a lot don't have this issue, but I know it was an issue for me. So now the fact that your health bar glows yellow or gold makes it much easier to see where your character, your champion is. So I actually like this a lot. I know some people have said that they think it's ugly, but I think it's a big improvement. Hold on, let me see if this is in any of the screenshots. Let me see, this might be in the Nasus visual upgrade. No, it's not. I thought that there might be a screenshot of it. Okay, so sorry, it's not listed there. You'll have to see it. Have to check it out in game. So I'm sorry I don't have a screenshot to show. But anyway, just log into the client. You'll see what it looks like. Okay, champion changes. We're going to try to do these quickly and then focus on the support ones. So they've changed Corki. As to whether this is a nerf or a buff is a little bit hard to say. Overall, it feels like this is a buff, but it has increased the skill cap a little bit. So Phosphor Bomb Q, they've reduced the mana cost right here. Mana cost reduced to, well, you can see 60 up to 100 from 80 to 120. Cast range increased. Now grants vision while the missile's in the air. All that's good, but here's the downside. Now lobs a bomb through the air that explodes at the end location instead of instantly damaging the area. So this is, everything else is a buff, but this is of course a huge nerf. Phosphor Bomb previously was point and click. You put the cursor and you click and the damage is instant. So there's basically no way to dodge it. Now this is a dodgeable skill shot. So even though everything else is better, lower mana cost, higher cast range, grants vision, everything else is better, but it's a skill shot that's much harder to hit. I mean, yes, technically before it was a skill shot too, because you did have to point and click. But also, you know, it wasn't point and click, it wasn't harass in the sense that if you just click on a champion, they automatically take damage in the way that like a Rise Q is, a Rise little overload thing that he throws out. But it was almost impossible to miss. Let's be clear. It was almost impossible to miss. Now it's a skill shot that's much harder to, is significantly different, more difficult to hit, but everything else is better. So overall, is it better or worse? Hard to say. It's just different. As I said, the skill cap is now higher. However, everything else is buffed too. Gatling gun, mana cost reduced to 50 at all ranks instead of 60 scaling up to 80. That's quite nice. Missile barrage, total attack damage ratio increased to 20, 30, 40% from 20%. So late game, his missiles deal noticeably more damage because they have a better scaling ratio. So overall, I think this actually helps Corki quite a bit. It feels like this is a buff overall. You just have to learn to hit his Qs, basically. Yes, it is harder to hit his Qs. If you can't hit them, then it's a nerf. Overall, though, most of his functionality is improved, so keep that in mind. Gragas has gotten some changes here. One thing that is, overall, this is a pretty big Gragas nerf. He is a very highly played in competitive mid laner. Overall, this is a nerf, but there is some functionality change that makes it better, makes his skills a little bit better in some ways. Now he has a small buffer before the barrel reaches its destination, where barrel roll can be activated to explode on arrival. So in other words, you can trigger his barrel. This is his Q, his main damage go. You can trigger that when it arrives faster. It's a little bit easier to do that. Now here's the trade-off. From 1100 down to 950. And range reduces, as we said before. Nerfing the range of skills is one of the biggest ways you make it weaker. So this is a pretty sizable nerf overall to Gragas' Q, which is his main source of damage and his most important skill. Okay, Body Slam, some stuff is changed around here. Now deals full damage to all targets hit rather than divided amongst them. This is useful for farming and pushing lanes in particular. So it makes it a little bit easier to farm waves. However, this is a huge nerf. Cooldown increased from 7 seconds up to 12. Yes, it's reduced by half if Gragas collides with the unit. But that said, this is still a big nerf. And overall, I'd say this is probably a nerf because that is a massive cooldown increase. What this means is Gragas' mobility is much lower. One of the things that people liked about Gragas is he could just roam around the map so fast. In late game, he would often have 40% cooldown reduction, which is the max. And basically every 4 seconds, he can body slam. And he's just running around the map so fast. So by increasing the cooldown, it makes it much harder for him to do this. It lowers his mobility by a huge amount. Yes, it's nice if he hits a unit. If he hits a unit, the cooldown's actually lower than it was before. So for trading in lane, it's better. But for moving around the map, strictly the mobility aspect, it's a lot weaker. So overall, these are nerfs to Gragas. The cast range on his Q and the cooldown to his E. Overall, I'd have to say these are nerfs, but there is a little bit of extra functionality added to these skills as well. That said, overall, he's going to be weaker. Okay, now Leone is listed here. We'll get to the other supports in a minute. This is basically, well, actually, let's come back to Leone in a little bit because she fits in with the other supports, and we'll come back to that in a bit. Morgana, they have a new interface effect, now displays the leash radius to Morgana and her victims for the duration of the effect. Overall, this is probably a bit of a nerf because it makes it easier for her victims to run out of the soul shackles. I mean, sure, it's more Morgana players can see where the radius is to keep people in the leash, but I have to feel like it's easier to run out of the leash on her soul shackles, in all honesty. So it's an interface thing. It's not really intended as a nerf or a buff. But I do feel like making it easier to run out of the... I feel like it makes it easier to run out of the soul shackles, to be perfectly honest. Overall, it's pretty minor, though. Okay, Nasus has a visual upgrade. You can see that right here. Nasus has received a visual upgrade, and it looks pretty good. The initial splash art that they had thrown out there didn't look so great. It made him look like this really vicious wolf-like animal. They actually went back and changed that, so it made Nasus not look quite so fierce, which is actually more in fitting with his character. But overall, the visual upgrade does look pretty good. Actually, it's right on the client, so I'll go ahead and pull that up once again. Here's the visual upgrade for Nasus. One of the older champions. That's the new portrait art right there, the new splash art, and then the portrait art is the Nasus face or whatever. So this is what it looks like now, for anyone who hasn't already seen it. Overall, it looks pretty good. Can't really complain. It looks pretty good. And the animations in particular are quite nice. That said, I was happy with the old Nasus art. Doesn't really make a big difference to me. I don't like... Oh, one thing I will mention. I don't like the Galactic Nasus artwork as much. I actually like the way this looked before the rework. The Pharaoh Nasus artwork is much better than the old one, in my opinion. Of course, obviously, this is subject to opinion. Overall, though, can't really complain. Looks pretty good as far as what they did. Nasus also got nerfed, though, in this patch. They nerfed the lifesteal, his passive, scaled down to 10, 15, 20%. Instead of 14, 17, 20%. So at level 1, that's the biggest difference. Once you hit level 7, it gets pretty close to the old value, 15 as opposed to 17. And then at level 13, it's back to the way it was before. So yeah, overall, definitely a nerf here. Nasus was a little too safe in top lane. Basically, people were speccing in defense, starting with a Doran shield, and then running either HP regen per 5 quints or lifesteal quints. And Nasus could start with, like, at level 1, okay, so if you have 6%, if you have 3 lifesteal quints, 6%, that's 6% lifesteal. He was starting at 20% lifesteal at level 1. And he was just sustaining with a Doran shield, like, to a ridiculous extent. Like, you couldn't harass him out of lane. So now he has lost 4% lifesteal, which will make a difference at level 1. Will make a difference, but he's still pretty darn strong. I mean, the biggest issue for Nasus is he's got this great sustain with his lifesteal, and his 2 core items both grant him cooldown reduction and armor and magic resist. So his 2 key items are Glacial Shroud, which is armor plus cooldown reduction, and his other core item is Spirit Visage, which is magic resist plus cooldown reduction. So he gets crazy cooldown reduction to farm up his Siphoning Strike, which grants him more lifesteal through his passive. And then he also gets armor and magic resist, and then his ult gives him health. So he just becomes incredibly tanky, and he also deals outstanding damage. Yeah, he's actually a very good top laner right now. Very, very good. Tick teleport goes top lane with Nasus, and he just farms all day, and by the 20-minute mark, he's like incredibly hard to kill, and he deals major damage. Anyway, that's more than I should have said about Nasus. It's pretty basic nerf, just nerfed his lifesteal. Nautilus getting extra, just got a straight buff here on his passive. Root duration increased. Half second up to 1.5 seconds as he increases in level. That's up from half second up to 1 second. On his, again, this is his passive on his auto attacks. So this is just a straight buff. He's just better all the way around at all points in time with the way that this has been changed. So big increase. Nautilus getting a nice buff here, which is good because he's a little bit underplayed. But as always with Nautilus, you must be very careful because if Nautilus gets buffed, he becomes incredibly overpowered. His kit is such that if he can jungle effectively, he becomes super duper strong because his kit just has ridiculous amounts of crowd control on it. This probably won't change how much he's played, but it's a nice little quality of life increase. Nidalee getting some nerfs here. AP Nidalee is really annoying. Everybody hates AP Nidalee. She is actually really strong in that role, but these nerfs are pretty minor. They're not really going to be enough to get people to stop playing her. Q, Javelin Toss. This is the one that is sort of the bread and butter skill of AP Nidalee. Now calculates damage based on where the Javelin was initially cast rather than where Nidalee is when the Javelin hits the target. So basically you can't toss a Javelin and then run backwards to get more damage. I guess that's obviously a nerf, but it's pretty minor. No longer gains damage from distance traveled until it exceeds Nidalee's human auto attack range. Max damage unchanged. What this means basically is a short range spear that hits will deal less damage. A max range spear will still do the same damage as it did before. Again, they're nerfs, but they're fairly minor overall. And then here, Bushwhack, Vision, and Armor MR Shred debuff duration reduced from 12 seconds down to 8, and that seems like a smart move. When you step, this is her trap, by the way, when you stepped over her trap. The fact that that lasted for 12 seconds seemed a little ridiculous. Like, you step on a trap and Nidalee would get vision on you for 12 seconds, that felt like it was too long. 8 seconds feels more normal. I mean, 12 seconds is a long, long time. So, as I said, they're nerfs, but they're fairly minor. Here, Nunu, they are changing his Kinsu to be in line with the new Smite. What that means is the cooldown is lower. You can see the cooldown is lower. The damage is lower, again, to fit with the new Smite. The new Smite deals 400 damage when you first get it. So now the new Consume deals 400. If it were 500, you could outdamage Smite, and Nunu would be a counter-jungling god yet again. Does anyone remember when they screwed up and Nunu's Consume outdamaged Smite for a brief period of time? Oops! So they are making sure that doesn't happen. And then the heal has been reduced as well at lower ranks to make up for the fact that the cooldown is so much lower. And again, note that the cooldown scales back to the same value. It's 9 at max rank now, and it was 9 at max rank before. Consume damage, 1,000 at max rank now, and it was 1,000 at max rank before. So basically, this is just to put Consume in line with the new Smite changes. Not much to say there. Seems like a smart decision. Sivir was, as it turned out, after a rework, Sivir was really powerful, and I actually had that wrong in the last patch review. If you just watched that and didn't watch the video I did on Sivir, then I was wrong about that. I thought that Sivir wouldn't be that strong, but she really was. So, in particular, Sivir's ultimate and her boomerang blade were both really quite good. Anyway, what they've done is they've scaled down the damage on the boomerang blade. Now scales with total attack damage rather than bonus attack damage, which is a buff, actually. You want total attack damage, not just bonus attack damage. However, in exchange for that, the damage has been greatly reduced. Now it's 25 up to 105, as opposed to 60 up to 240. And the ratio is unchanged. Okay, so without going into the numbers, I saw some posts that went into this. Basically, you deal less damage early on. Eventually, you can outscale this because it now outscales off of total attack damage instead of bonus attack damage. But you have to get a really high amount of total attack damage for that to work. Like, you have to be at like 300 or something AD for that to work. And even then, I'm still not sure it really comes out ahead. But anyway, so this is a nerf to her Boomerang Blade damage, basically. Her nerf to her Boomerang Blade damage. What people were doing on Sivir is they'd rush a Bloodthirster as her core item. A Bloodthirster gives 100 bonus attack damage. So with this ratio, it would be plus 110. And then you'd have Boomerang Blade at level 9 dealing 240 plus 110. So what is that? You'd be dealing 350 for the Boomerang Blade plus your basic attack damage, which would be, you know, like 150. So basically you'd be dealing like, I don't know, 400 or 500 damage on the Boomerang Blade. And it was just too high. If you took a double Boomerang Blade hit, that could, you know, rip off like half of somebody's life from one hit. So they've scaled down the damage on her Boomerang Blade. And it's noticeably lower. Will people still keep playing Sivir? I'm not sure. This may or may not be enough to get people to stop playing here. I don't know at this point. This is a fairly substantial nerf, particularly for the Rush Bloodthirster first Sivir, which is what everyone was doing. Fairly substantial nerf. We will have to see, but this is a pretty big deal. Makes her Q hit a lot weaker. Vayne has a minor nerf here. What they did is they took away, as it says here, some of the hidden power from her Condemn. This is her E, the one that knocks people back. Vayne can no longer queue up a basic attack on a champion after hitting them with Condemn. Basically, you could Condemn and then immediately auto, and it's making it so you can't do that. Fixed a bug where the target would be briefly unable to act at the end of the effect, even if they didn't hit a wall. I'm pretty sure that wasn't a bug. I think that's just how the skill was supposed to function. When you got hit by Condemn, it was like a mini stun, but now that's gone. And Condemn now deals all damage after knocking the target back. So I guess you don't get the damage immediately. You get the damage at the end of the knockback. Again, it's minor, but when Vayne's on 50 health and she's desperately getting off one more attack, might make a difference. Overall, this is minor. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but it does reduce her power a little bit. As it says here, we want to reduce some power on a champion without directly reducing their numbers. That's the basic idea behind this one, and it should be effective. Vayne is very popular, has been very strong for a very long time. I like that they're trying to do a nerf in an intelligent way without just sort of crippling Vayne, so I like that idea. How it will work in practice is hard to say. I don't think this will get people to stop playing Vayne. It will just tone her down a little bit. Okay, now for one of the big things in this patch is the complete reworking to support champions. So let me give you a quick overview first. This is the TLDR, too long didn't read, or I guess in this case, too long didn't listen version of the changes. Basically, all the supports have had their base values nerfed and their ability power ratios nerfed. In exchange, they get scaling on some kind of other utility function. So, lower base value, lower AP ratios. And then in exchange, they get some kind of extra utility scaling back, like more movement speed or more slow or something like that. The problem with this is not really enough to make these supports worth playing, is sort of the big problem. Why should you play Sona and have to build 200 AP to get back to the old Sona when you could just play Annie or Zyra or Fiddlesticks and get 200 AP and have a champion who hasn't had their ratios and base values nerfed? So there really isn't much of a reason to play a support after these changes, a traditional support, I should say. That's sort of the long story short is I think Riot has messed up here. I think that they've screwed up the balancing on traditional supports and made them too weak. Okay, longer version. So, in Season 4, what Riot wants to do is give more gold to the support role. And that's a smart idea. And they've done this in a couple ways. They've reworked the support items, which we're going to look at later on in this patch. They've reworked the vision system, which we're also going to talk about. Make it so you're not just a ward bot. They've removed oracles, so supports can't even buy oracles. So what all this... Oh, and they've reworked how assist sprees work too. You'll get more gold from assists in Season 4. Anyway, what all this means is supports will now have more gold, and you can't buy like 50 wards because you can only have 3 on the map at once. And you can't buy oracles at all because they no longer exist in the game. So what this means is supports will now be buying items, like real items that have real stat values to it. This puts Riot in a difficult position though, because if you leave supports in their traditional role, then all of a sudden now they'll have all kinds of money and they'll be building ability power. And if Lulu's really effective with 0 AP, and all of a sudden Lulu can now build 400 AP, then Lulu's going to be overpowered. So that's the problem. Like, well, we have to nerf the supports. because otherwise they're going to be overpowered with all this extra gold that we've got. They're going to have insane utility, and they'll also deal really high damage, and they're going to be overpowered. Like, we'll run Lulu mid again. Does anyone remember when that happened, when she first came out? And she was this amazing solo laner with, like, crazy utility. So that's Riot's thinking, is we have to nerf the supports, or with all this new gold, they'll be overpowered. And that's what they did. The problem, though, is once you nerf the supports by doing that, then there's no real reason to play them in those roles. Like, if I can play the support role, and I can get, you know, instead of 5,000 gold, I've got 10,000 gold or 15,000 gold, why should I play Janna, who has now had all of her AP ratios nerfed and all of her base damages nerfed, when I could just play, I don't know, Annie instead, who has not had her base values nerfed and has good AP scaling and also provides very heavy utility in the bottom lane. Or I could play Fiddlesticks, who does the same thing, who has not had his scaling nerfed. His AP ratios are still quite good. And he also brings all kinds of utility and crowd control. So, you know, why should I play Sona when I could play, like, Zyra or Fiddlesticks instead, who have not been nerfed? Or bring in another AP mage in bottom lane. Like, if I want to play, instead of playing Janna, why don't I play Orianna? She's got better ratios. She provides the same amount of utility. She deals more damage. Like, why not play Orianna? Or play somebody like Lissandra. Or someone like, I don't know, anyone who has a decent amount of crowd control in mid. You could play Morgana, or play Lux, or play Veigar. You know, anyone who brings some kind of utility. Why not just play them in bottom lane? So Riot's stuck in a bad situation here, where they can't make the traditional supports too good, or they become overpowered. But if they nerf the traditional supports, then they just become useless and unplayable. And I think that's where they are now. Not trying to overstate this. Yes, of course you can still play the traditional supports. But they seem very weak compared to just sticking a mage with crowd control in bottom lane. And in particular, if people are watching the competitive scene right now, I don't know how many people are doing that because LCS is not going on. Right now, over in Korea, who's being played in bottom lane? Zyra, Fiddlesticks, Annie. You're not seeing Sona being played there much anymore. You're not seeing Janna played there. You're not seeing Soraka, not seeing Lulu. You're seeing mage supports. And all the traditional supports just got weaker, like a lot weaker in this patch. So let's look at what they did here. Try not to get into too much detail because there's just a ridiculous number of changes here. Janna, they have changed their passive. It is, instead of being global, it's now local, 800 range. Movement speed buff increased to compensate, 5% from 3%. That's not bad, but, you know, it's still a nerf overall. Yes, it's nice for people near her, but it's still a nerf. Howling Gale, her tornado, ability power ratio destroyed. Instead of 0.75, it's now 0.35. And yes, you can get this back. If you charge up for 4 seconds, you get the ratio back. But anything less than a full charge, AP ratio is way lower. Charge damage reduced. 25 from 60 before, now it's 15 up to 35. So lower ability power ratio, lower damage. It's a straight nerf. Ability is just weaker to compensate for Janna getting ability power now. Zephyr, passive self-movement speed buff now scales 1% per 50 ability power. So 0.02 ability power ratio. So basically there's now scaling to this ability. The passive benefit now scales with 0.02 AP ratio. Passive self-movement speed buff changed. Here it is. You can see this is the larger one. It is now 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 with that ratio instead of 4, 7, 10, 13, 16%. So, hooray! When you get a ton of ability power, eventually you can outscale it. I think you need, what is this? Let's see, 1% per 50 ability power ratio. So what? When you get 200 AP and above, it's now better. But below 200 AP, it's now weaker. And the slow debuff now scales as well. But the base speed has been nerfed as well. So you can see 40% down from 48%. And you need like 250 ability power or something like that to get back to the old value. So once again, and then the AP ratio is lower too. Also a lowered AP ratio. So again, you can increase the utility of this skill with a lot of ability power. If you've got like 500 AP, the skill's better. But if you're at 0 AP, which is where supports are for the entire laning phase, it's much worse. It's a lot weaker. So again, as I mentioned, you get more utility scaling, but the ratios are lower, the damage is lower, etc. And then similar thing for Eye of the Storm or Shield. This is our bread and butter skill. Attack damage, the AD buff now scales. It has a 0.1 AP ratio, so if you have 100 ability power, you'll get plus 10 AD. But in exchange, the AP ratio is now lower, down to 0.7 from 0.9. So, as I've said, in order to get Janna back to where she was before, you have to build a lot of AP. Like the break-even point is around 200, roughly. Something like that. That's to get back to where she was before. If you build more than 200 AP, roughly speaking, then her skills are better. They have more additional utility. But they deal less damage. They have lower AP ratios. All the AP ratios are lower. You can see across the board. Lower AP ratio. Lower AP ratio. Lower AP ratio. So, AP Janna basically is destroyed as a result of this. And I hate to keep harping on this, but supports are picked based on what they do in laning phase. If you are not playing the game, it's sort of I haven't played a lot of support and you might not be aware of this, but this is why supports are picked for their strength in the laning phase. And what Riot has done is crippled the laning phase for supports. So yes, it's nice. They're better in late game. They're better late game when they have 10,000 gold and they have 300 ability power. Yes, the supports are better then. But most games are won or lost before then. Most games are won or lost in the laning phase. Like you should when you pick a support, you should pick one that's going to win the lane with your AD partner or whoever your partner is in bottom lane. So again, why should I pick one of these traditional supports and have this really crummy laning phase when I could pick, as I said, Annie or Zyra or Fiddlesticks or another AP mage and just kill the other support, just build AP and kill the other support. It doesn't really make sense. So I feel like this was the wrong way to do these supports. If anything, it should have been done the other way around. They have a very strong laning phase, but then they don't scale, and that's what makes them different from an AP mage. Like an AP mage will start out weaker, but then will scale. A support starts out strong, but then their scaling is really bad, so they're early game focused, which is what you think support should be. I feel like this was done backwards, is the problem. I just feel like this was done in the wrong way. So, again, I would just rather play a mage and just go out and kill people and still have tons of utility. Anyway, well, we'll see, but that's my initial thought. And then all the other supports are basically the same way. Like Lulu's the same way. They added an AP ratio to her passive, but the base damage is reduced. You need 200 AP to get back to the old damage. So her passive's weaker until you get lots of AP. Glitter Lance, rather than decaying, the slow now decays at an AP ratio. That actually is quite good. That's actually quite good. They removed the AP boost from her W, her Whimsy. Movement speed bonus now scales. It has now the movement speed bonus has a 0.1 AP ratio. So again, you have to itemize. What is this? You have to get 1% for 10 ability power. So this one actually, the scaling's not bad on this. But you do have to get 50 AP to get back to the old value. And her AP ratio has been reduced on her E. So, I mean, Lulu comes out of this okay, but, she does less damage with her passive, and she has lower scaling on her E. So, I mean, I think Lulu's okay, but, I mean, she's weaker than she was before. You got to build a lot of ability power to make her better. Nami, similar thing. She now has bonus movement speed scaling on her passive. Lower AP ratio on her Q. That doesn't really matter because her Q is not her major damage source. Percentage power of later bounces now scales off of AP. Slow percentage scales. AP power, AP ratio on her R is reduced. Nami also comes out okay from this because it's not that big a deal. Sona though, Sona got hit pretty hard overall. They've reduced her AP rate. They added an AP ratio to her power chord. You can see add an AP ratio to the damage of power chord. That's her damage one. Add an AP ratio to damage reduction. Add an AP ratio to the slow amount. Although these ratios are so ridiculously small, it almost doesn't matter that much. AP ratio on her Q lowered. Base heal amount reduced. Let's see here. So you heal less on her W. So you deal less damage with your Q because the ratio is lower. Reduce the base heal amount on her W. That's to make up for the fact that she'll have more ability power. Active speed bonus is lower unless you get a ton of ability power, and the AP ratio is reduced on her Crescendo. So basically all of Sona's stuff is nerfed. Like she's been made weaker in just about every respect, unless you get like 500 ability power and then she's better. Oh great, thanks, that's really nice. So yeah, her skills are better if you build tons and tons of ability power, but in the laning phase everything's weaker. Everything's weaker in the laning phase, which is what actually matters. Yeah, Sona was not treated well. And apparently what people said is Riot's balancing this off of something like an Aram map, like all random, all mid, the Howling Abyss, which is not a smart way to do balancing because Aram is a very unique situation. They were like, oh, Sona, when she gets a lot of money on Aram, she's like really strong and she's got a crazy win ratio. It's like, well, that's true, but that's Aram, and Aram doesn't really have much to do with Summoner's Rift, so I wouldn't balance anything off of Aram, which is just bizarre. I mean, Heimerdinger had like a 45% win rate on Summoner's Rift pre-rework, but he had like a 65% win ratio on Aram because of his passive, which is amazingly good for Aram, but whatever. Anyway, Soraka's gotten more crazy rework stuff. So she got buffs to her base stats, which is a big deal, by the way. Buffs to base stats helps. They changed her passive. Health and mana restoring abilities are 1% more effective for each 2% the target is missing. This replaces her old passive, which was free magic resist aura for people around her. So if you try to heal people that are low, they get more back, which is kind of nice, but as you'll see, they greatly lowered the value on her heal, so now somebody has to be low just to get the same health, get the same healing back. Starcall, what they did to this one is kind of sad. It now the MR shred now scales. +1 MR shred per 100 ability power. That's a 0.01 AP ratio. MR reduction changed to 6 at all levels with that minuscule ability power ratio. For them a flat 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So congratulations. If you build 600 ability power, you get back to the old ratio. Hooray! Great. Awesome. So the magic resist shred is a huge nerf. This is kind of nice. If Starcall hits an enemy champ, the cooldown on Astral Blessing is reduced by as much as 10%. That's kind of nice. The mana cost, though, has, been sort of normalized or flattened out. 30 up to 70 as opposed to 20 up to 80. That said, this is still more of a nerf. Why? Because support Sorakas typically leave this at rank 1 much of the time. So that's probably more of a nerf. Overall, I feel like this is kind of a nerf. Overall, the MR shred's much lower. And, I mean, this is nice, but doesn't feel like it's that great. All right, so they've added a bonus armor scaling ratio to her Astral Blessing. 0.15 armor scaling ratio on here. Bonus armor is, of course, now lower as a result of this. Let's see, what is it? Bonus armor change. Oh, never mind. Actually, the bonus armor is higher with the scaling ratio. That's interesting. Okay, so you do get more armor, but the thing is the duration has been reduced from 3 seconds down to 2 seconds. So that armor buff actually is quite substantial. And with the AP ratio, it's even more substantial. But it is more of a burst bonus. And the heal has been reduced substantially. Heal's been reduced by a lot, particularly at higher ranks. 270 down from 350, and the AP ratio is lower as well. They did lower the mana cost, which I guess is nice, but the heal grants more armor, but for a shorter duration, for 2 seconds as opposed to 3, and the actual heal is noticeably lower. Infuse allied cast now gives an ally 100 mana plus donates 5% of Soraka's maximum mana. That sounds nice, except that, yeah, again, the mana value's been cut in half off of what it gave before. And the enemy cast now deals damage equal to 160 plus 5% of Soraka's max mana, as opposed to 250 plus 0.6 ability power ratio. And yes, there's an ability power ratio on this too, but the AP ratio is lower. So now you have to itemize max mana on Soraka to get the most out of this, which is bad. You don't want to have to itemize max mana. That is bad. You don't want to be itemizing a lot of mana. That's not good. That's a stat that you're having to put more gold into to get something out of this. And then this is kind of nice. Can't be cast on allies who don't use mana or are already at max mana. But overall, yeah, I mean, you don't want to have to itemize more stats. Now you have to itemize both AP and max mana on Soraka, which is not good. You want to have to itemize fewer things, not more things. So I feel like that's, let's see, what's the break-even point? So 5% of max mana. Before it was giving 200. So let's see, to get 100 mana... So, okay, so the break-even point is 2,000 mana on this skill. 2,000 mana. That's pretty high. You're going to have to you'll get, at the end of a typical game, you'd be somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 mana. If you don't, actually, you can probably check this. I'm curious here. Hold on. Let's see. League of Legends Champions. Where is this one? Let's see what Soraka's max mana at level 18 is. I'm just curious. This is probably more time than I'm wasting on a video that's going to be ridiculously long anyway, but I'm genuinely curious to see what her max mana is. Let's see. Okay, so it's 240 plus 60 per level. So let's see, 240 plus 60 times 17, because there's 17 levels up. Oh wow, that's a lot lower than I thought. She only has 1260 max mana if you don't itemize anything. Holy cow. So you got to itemize 700 mana just to get back to the old value. That's terrible. Holy cow, that is terrible. Wow, that's really bad. That's really bad. Okay, yeah, this is not good. Overall, I feel like they just should have left Soraka alone, and like, you know, now she's got ability power, which means she's got really strong heals, but now her heals are weaker. They're so much worse. And her infuse is so much worse. And her wish, like her ult, check this out. Now her ult heals for way less. It's 90 health less. And the ability power ratio has been cut too. Like, she's just so much weaker. I don't know. It's disappointing to me. Like, why couldn't you just leave her alone? And okay, maybe she'd be too strong, but like, I don't know. I don't get it. Like, why would you play her over an aggressive mage support or a tanky bruiser support? I don't see it. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong here, and her numbers are awesome, but I'm just not seeing it. Okay, Taric has also gotten reworked. Basically, he now scales off of armor in every way, as opposed to scaling off other stuff. His passives have been reworked again. By the way, Taric has had about 4 different passives over the years. After casting a spell, Taric gains a buff that deals 30% of his total armor as bonus magic damage to his next auto attack, and also reduces the cooldown of all abilities by 2 seconds. When you use that passive attack, it reduces the cooldown of all abilities by 2 seconds. So again, basically, he scales off of total armor. You want to build armor, and he'll deal more damage on his auto attacks. Okay, Imbue, cooldown reduced on auto attacks removed. That's been moved to passive. Now it affects all of his skills instead of just his heal. This is his heal, by the way. I should mention that. Base cooldown lowered from 20 scaling to 16. Now 18 scaling to 14. AP ratio crippled, lowered from 0.6 to 0.3. Now scales with Taric's bonus health. Interesting. Very interesting. So the AP ratio is terrible, but it scales off bonus health, which is kind of interesting. What they're suggesting is don't build AP on Taric, just build like straight tankiness. And that might be quite good, actually. Anyway, here on Shatter, base damage has been reduced by, by 10 at all ranks, and now it scales off 30% of total armor, has no AP ratio, instead of scaling off of 20% total armor. So again, now scales off of total armor. And the armor reduction now scales as well, off of armor. Similar thing here, AP ratio lowered on Dazzle. It's been cut in half. Cooldown has been increased, and wow, that's actually a pretty big nerf. Okay, this is, I actually hadn't thought about this before. This is a big nerf to Taric. Big nerf to Dazzle. So basically what this means is his stun, this is his stun, by the way, 18-second cooldown at rank 1. Wow. So if you leave this as a 1-point skill, oh boy. See, this is the problem for Taric, is you need to put points in all his skills. I mean, I guess you could skip his Imbue, his heal, but the cooldown is really high at that at rank 1, 2. Yeah, see, the problem is you need to skill all of his skills. Like, you need points in all his skills to make him function. You need to rank up Shatter because it's his best skill. But you also need to rank up Dazzle because you need to drop the cooldown, and the duration of the stun increases with more points in the skill. But then you also need to scale up his Imbue because his heal is on a really long cooldown if you don't put points in it. So I just feel like Taric's in an awkward place. Like, he's almost in a place where he needs solo lane levels to be effective. Yeah, so that's like the problem here. And then his Radiance, the ability power ratio lowered. Once again, lowered his AP ratio. And the cooldown increased. Wow, that's just like a kick in the nuts to increase the cooldown on his ult too. Was that really necessary? Was Taric so popular that you had to nerf his ult by nerfing the cooldown? Anyway, so long story short, Taric now scales off of armor. He also has a minor amount of scaling with health, but he mostly scales off of armor. So don't build AP on Taric. Build armor. Build, I don't know, something like Randuin's or Sunfire or something like that, or Frozen Heart. But AP doesn't really do that much on him at this point. That said, I don't feel like he's a good support because you need points in all his skills. None of them are very good at rank 1. They all have to be rank 5, and you can't get every skill to rank 5 until level 18, so, which is not what a support wants. So that's why I feel like he's in an awkward place. And then finally, let's go back and look at Leona, who is up here because she is also a support. Similar thing here, what they did is they changed the base armor and MR from her W. This is her shield, basically, the one that gives her extra armor and magic resist. They lowered the bonus armor and MR, but very low, 5 points at each rank, and they added scaling Armor bonus equal to 20% of bonus armor. MR equal to 20% of bonus magic resist. Now again, this is not scaling off of armor and magic resist. It scales off bonus armor and bonus magic resist. So you have to itemize these stats for them to be effective. Now that said, because this was so minor, this is not really that big of a deal for Leona. Like 65 as opposed to 70 is fairly low. And let's see, how much bonus armor do you have to get itemized in order to get this back? So it's 20% of bonus armor. So that's 1 out of every... You'd have to get 25 bonus armor and 25 bonus MR to get back to this. That feels pretty low. That's like, what? That's like a null magic mantle, basically? That's pretty low. So you will probably top that. And then everything from there is bonus. You know, everything from there is an increase. In fact, you can probably get this from Runes and Masteries, in all honesty. You can probably get this just from Runes and Masteries, and then you're in the clear. So Leona was not really touched by all these various support nerfs, and I actually think Leona is going to be a very good support. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the support items, but I think Leona is actually in a really good position. See, Leona's problem was her kit makes it so she has to all in when she uses her skills. Like, she tosses her E, her Zenith Blade, she goes in, and she can't get out of a fight. She is committed to a fight when she goes in. Which is why in Season 2 and Season 3, Leona goes into a fight, she has no items, she has a sight stone and nothing else, she just dies instantly. But now that supports can actually build items, Leona will actually be tanky enough to survive in those fights. The new support item, Face of the Mountain, or whatever it's called, is really good on someone like Leona. And she can also build an item like Randuin, she can build Spirit Massage, she could even maybe build Trinity if she gets fed. By the way, Trinity on Leona is really good. Nobody ever sees it because of her support role, but she's actually really good with Trinity Force. So anyway, I think that Leona's going to be very good overall. She was largely untouched by this round of like brutal support nerfs as I see it. And the new items really fit her quite well. Anyway, minor changes and bug fix. Let's run through these very quickly. Fixed a bug with Electrical Surge where it would not properly hit a target if Mark of the Storm wore off, blah, blah, blah. This is pretty minor bug fix. Shen, they over-nerfed his Shadow Dash a little bit, as it says we hit his end collision radius a little too hard. We're increasing it a little. Collision radius at the end point has been slightly increased. It was a little ridiculous. You'd taunt someone and you'd be off by like the most minuscule amount, and they would not be taunted. So they've corrected that a little bit. Although they didn't say by how much. I wish they'd said the unit, like the range radius. But anyway, so reverting a little bit of the nerf to Shen. They did go a little bit too far. Improved running animation for Singed and Soraka, okay. Fixed a bug where the Dustbringer Trail was applying inconsistently, okay, no big deal. Fixed a bug where if Vi's Banshee's Veil is popped at the same moment as Vi casts her ult, it would cause Vi to be locked into her charging animation. That is hilarious, but probably good to clear up. Items, the term hat is now searchable in the item shop. That's for Deathcap, obviously. Finally, okay. Okay, items changes, Doran's Blade. Cost reduced from 440 down to 475 down to 440. Attack damage reduced from 10 down to 8. Basic attacks restore 3 health for ranged champions, 5 health for melee champions. This is a nerf. This is a pretty big nerf. Yes, it's cheaper, but less attack damage, and in particular, only 3 health back for ranged champions is a pretty noticeable nerf. Yes, you'll be able to start Doran's Blade in a health pot, but this item is definitely weaker than it was before. Strangely, Doran's Shield was not nerfed, which is weird because Doran's Shield is the best of the 3 Doran's items right now. Doran's Shield is really good, so I'm not sure why Doran's Shield was left unaffected. It also, obviously, melee champions are less effective by this. This is more for ranged champions. I don't know if that's going to change the ranged ADs from starting Doran's Blade. They probably will, but it definitely makes the item weaker. They also changed Longsword, made Longsword weaker. Cost reduced to 360 gold from 400, and all items building out of Longsword have had their combined cost increased to accommodate. So we might see ADs starting with Longsword instead of starting with Doran's Blade. I don't know, but the stats were not affected on Longsword. It's just 40 gold cheaper, and Doran's Blade is weaker, so food for thought right there. All right, changing the vision system. They have removed Alace's Miracle, which has probably affected all of about 5 people. An item that nobody ever bought. Removed it from the game. Didn't really seem to fit. Oracle's Elixir removed from the game. Yes, no more oracles. So the item is just gone, which means that vision stuff is going to be very, very different. And I don't want to go into too much detail about all the vision changes because that's a subject for a whole video in and of itself. But no more oracles. You're going to have to use trinkets and pinks to get vision. And that's a radical change to the gameplay, particularly in the competitive scene. So Very, very big changes, but don't want to go into too much detail. They have also remade Philostone Lucky Pick, Kage or Cage's Lucky Pick, however you want to pronounce it, and Emblem of Valor. They have removed these items from the game. Technically, they haven't. The items are still there, but they've completely changed what they are called and what they do. I'm not a big fan of this. I wish that they had kept the names. Like, Philostone's been around since beta, and like it's been such a core item in the competitive scene. Riot's rationale for getting rid of it, they said that it was confusing too many people, which is just nonsense. People were not getting confused. It's just, I don't know, it's just kind of stupid that they got rid of, that they changed it to something different. I don't think people were actually confused about this. And the same thing for the Lucky Pick, but people didn't really care about Lucky Pick or Emblem of Valor. Still, losing the Philostone is kind of sad, but I don't know what else we can do. They've gotten rid of the item. So let's look at what they changed that to, shall we? We'll come back to the first item in a minute. They've changed Philostone to Ancient Coin. Okay, so first and foremost, a little word about these. These are items intended to be used for support. You have 3 choices: Spell Thief's Edge, Ancient Coin, and Relic Shield. You can only buy one of these. You can only buy one of these gold-generating items. And they're really only purchasable by supports. Mid laners, solo laners, junglers can't really use these. Like, I don't know, maybe you could do some wacky build, but basically only supports can buy these. Let's just leave it there. You can only get one. So you have your choice of 3. Basically, it's AP, sustain, and tankiness. That's basically the choice. So let's start with Ancient Coin, because that's the old Philo. If you have no idea what to buy on a support, buy this. It's the most basic, it's the easiest to use. 365 cost, health and mana regen, unique passive, being near a minion death without dealing the killing blow grants 2 gold. Anytime a minion dies near you, you get 2 gold. So that's the most basic one. It's the replacement for the Philosopher's Stone. Okay, upgrades into Nomad's Medallion costs 485 gold, total 850. Health regen, mana regen, passive gold generation, 2 gold per 10, and then same passive before, being near a minion death without dealing the killing blow grants 4 gold. So similar thing. As long as you're not last hitting minions, if you're just near them, you get passive gold generation. Talisman of Ascension, this is basically Shirelia's Reverie, although for some reason Riot has changed the name and doesn't want to call it Shirelia's Reverie, which is stupid. I don't know why they did that. It's really dumb, but anyway, this is Shirelia's Reverie. Cooldown reduction, 20%, which is amazing, by the way. This is a really good item. 20% CDR. Health and mana regen, still has that gold passive ticking. You still get the minion, still get gold from a minion dying near you if you don't kill them. And then the unique active grants nearby allies 40% movement speed for 3 seconds. So it is the Shirelia's Reverie active right there. This is an amazingly good item. In particular, the 20% CDR feels way too high for the 970 gold that you're paying here. For the 970 gold, you're getting 20% CDR and an amazingly good active. Like, this item is awesome. The problem is the Ancient Coin, the Nomad's Medallion, they aren't so good. Like, these two actually are not all that great. But the upgraded form, Shirelia's, is really, really good. Like, the upgraded version is by far the best. So if you're going this path as a support, upgrade to this ASAP because it is really good. Let's look now at the ability power version, shall we? This is the replacement for Lucky Pick. Spell Thief's Edge, ability power, mana regen, passive gold immediately. Don't have to upgrade, just get passive gold immediately. And then a unique passive. Interesting thing here. Basic attacks against champions grant 4 gold, up to once every 10 seconds per enemy. Killing a minion disables this for 10 seconds. So anytime you use a basic attack against a champion, you get 4 gold. So this is really useful for Zyra support, Annie support. You've got that super long auto attack range. Keep tossing out autos. Gets up to 4 gold. Up to once every 10 seconds. But that's per enemy. If you're in a duo lane, you can actually get that passive on both people in the lane. You just got to auto attack, that's all. Is this only auto attack or is this spell damage? Okay, it looks like it's just basic attacks. I thought I had read somewhere where spell damage triggered this as well. Anyway, could be wrong. Alright, so upgraded version, Frostfang, 20 AP, mana regen, 4 gold per 10. So more gold per 10 than you're getting from Ancient Coin, by the way. Note that you're getting more passive gold generation. And then Tribute, basic attacks against champions grant 8 gold up to once every 10 seconds. A similar thing. Keep auto attack harassing. The final upgraded version, Frost Queen's Claim, 50 AP, 10 mana regen per 5, 4 gold per 10. That's the same as before. Similar thing. This time it's spells and basic attacks against champions grant 8 gold. So similar as before, although now it adds spells as well as basic attacks. And then the unique passive, this one's new, or actually no, never mind. This is the Shard of True Ice passive. Chill, you have an active, chills target enemies, enemy champ, and all nearby enemies. Deals 50 magic damage. That's pretty useless, but reduces 50% movement speed by 2 seconds. So basically, you can click on an enemy and reduce their movement speed by 50% for 2 seconds. It's a little bit like a Randuin slow, though it doesn't affect attack speed. This active is okay, but it's not really that good. It is far inferior to the Talisman of Ascension / Shirelia's Reverie active. Basically, if you're taking this route, you use this if you're playing an AP mage, you want ability power, you want mana regen, you want to be harassing. You can potentially get much more gold from this route than from the Ancient Coin, Nomad's Medallion, whatever route. You can potentially get a lot more gold, but it's a higher skill cap because you have to be harassing constantly. Also, Frost Queen's claim is just not as good as Talisman of Ascension. In particular, that 20% CDR is just delicious on there, and the active is way better. So it's kind of weird because Ancient Coin and Nomad's Medallion are like the low skill, it's like the low risk, low reward aspect, but then the upgraded version is better. It's kind of weird. You'd think that Frost Queen's claim would be better, but it's not. And so it's kind of weird. It's like these are weak early and then they get an amazing endgame product, whereas these are kind of better early and then the late game is kind of weaker. Anyway, but it's kind of strange. But basically, if you want to build AP and you want to harass, you take this. And if you just want to sit there healing in the brush, you take this. And then finally, there's the tank support option, and I really like this one. This one is hard to use, but I think that this is potentially the best of the three. Relic Shield costs 365. They all cost 365 gold. Starts you out with health and health regen, which is quite nice. So if people are not heavily mana dependent, like Leona, for example, like Thresh, for example, you go this route, and then the unique passive. Basic attacks execute minions below 200 health. So if a minion's below 200 health, they automatically die to your auto. Killing a minion in this way heals the nearby allied champion for 2% of your max health. Again, incentive to be tanky, build a lot of health. And grants them the bounty plus 5 gold. So basically, you last hit the minion, and then your partner gets the gold, plus 5 gold. So you get the gold for last hitting the minion, and then your partner in lane also gets the gold value, plus extra gold. And then that recharges every 30 seconds. So basically, every minion wave, you can last hit a creep. And that provides gold generation very comparable to what these other ones do if you are last hitting that minion. In particular, if you're last hitting a cannon creep, you get more gold, like significantly more gold than you're getting from Ancient Coin Nomad's Medallion. Then look at the upgraded version, Targan's Brace, 175 health, more health regen, same passive, same passive, similar thing as well. Though grants them the bounty plus 10 gold instead of bounty plus 5 gold. And then this, Face of the Mountain. This item is awesome. I have not even used this item in game, and I already love this. 375 health, 10% CDR, a good amount of health regen. This is quite substantial, by the way. 25 health per 5. Same passive as before, although now you get up to 4 charges. Oh, actually, I didn't see this before. You now get up to 4 charges. Wow. That's pretty. I didn't even realize this. Yeah, so the initial one's only 2, but you now get 4 charges. Wow, so you can last hit minions pretty fast. So like if you back or you're in a team fight, then these charges are stacking up, and then you can just use them. That's really nice. Then an interesting active, Deadly Phalanx, consumes 20% of your current health to shield target ally for 10% of your maximum health for 4 seconds. After 4 seconds, the target explodes, dealing 10% of your max health as AoE magic damage. So basically, you get to put a shield on one of your allies, and then that shield detonates after 4 seconds and deals damage. That's really good. And remember, it scales off of health. So if you're going tanky, you're building health, you put that shield on your ally, you're Leona and you're paired with Corki and they dive in and you put a big shield on them. I mean, that's great. So health, cooldown reduction, a useful passive, health regen, like what's not to like about this item? It only costs 2,000 gold. It's quite cheap. All these items are quite cheap. So the passive is not quite as good as the Shirelia's one on Talisman of Ascension. Not quite as good of a passive, but it's still pretty useful. And to get 375 health on a support item, that's very, very good. Oh, and 10% CDR. The 10% CDR is huge. The value of 10% CDR, what is that? That's about 400 to 500 gold worth of stats right there. So this is a really good item. Build this on any tanky support. Thresh or Leona or maybe Alistar even would want this. It's pretty good on Alistar too. Any kind of, or Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank would want this too. This would be quite good on Blitzcrank. So any of that stuff is good. Now the only thing is, again, the one skill cap part is you do have to be last hitting minions. And for melee supports, that is a little bit more difficult. But I still do think you should be able to pull this off. Like I don't think it's impossible to you know, you get 4 charges once you upgrade this. It can't be that difficult to last hit a minion. Just make sure that you communicate with your laning partner and tell them, you know, hey, I'm going to last hit some of these minions when they get low. As long as they know that, I feel like this is potentially a really strong path. So I'm quite excited to play Leona and test this out, test out Face of the Mountain. I feel like it's going to be very, very good. And in particular, you know, if I've got 375 bonus health and I'm up against, you know, squishy old Sona, who's sitting there with no bonus health and a bunch of health and mana regen, you know, I'm just going to, you know, punch her in the face basically and kill her. So anyway, I'm interested to see how that works. Okay, now the jungle items also got reworked, but not as substantially, Okay, so Hunter's Machete, Spirit Stone now also grant 3 health on hit versus monsters. Helpful for junglers who auto-attack quickly. Tiger Stance Udyr, for example, maybe. Madrid's Razor, the attack has been reduced. Basically, the stats on Madrid's Razor / Riggel's Lantern, these stats are much lower. Now grants armor and attack speed, and less armor than before. Unique passive deals 10 magic damage and heals 10 on hit against monsters. Here's the big change. Grants 40% increased gold from monsters. And you still have the ability to place the stealth ward, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's the problem with Riggles. Junglers have been testing this and running the numbers on the public beta environment, the PvE server. You have to sink 1,800 gold into this item. And the item itself is not very useful. It only grants 20 armor and 25% attack speed. These are not useful stats. They're not going to help you in combats. Like, they're just farming stats. So you have to sink 1,800 gold into an item, and then, in order to make that 1,800 gold back, you have to keep farming the jungle. Like, you have to farm and farm and farm in order to make this passive worthwhile. So you really have to farm another, what is it? You have to farm about another 2,000 to 3,000 gold beyond what you already sank into Riggles to start to make this item worthwhile. And if you're out there ganking lanes, pushing towers, you're not farming the jungle. So you basically, unless you spend the first 25 to 30 minutes just farming the jungle, you come out behind when you use Riggles. In particular, if somebody else builds a normal jungling item and is actually like pressuring lanes and ganking, they're going to come out ahead in almost every situation. So this item, I really do not suggest buying this. It looks attractive on paper, but you have to spend so much time farming the jungle to make it cost efficient that you're going to lose all the global objectives and you're not going to have pressure on the map. So I really don't suggest getting this. Anyway, the other items haven't been changed quite that much. Well, Spirit of the Spectral Wraith has, but the others not too much. Spirit of the Elder Lizard, they reduced the AD. Incinerate passive now procs on physical damage and increase the damage. So that's where you get it back. Get sort of that trade-off back. And then this is kind of interesting. Bounty Hunter passive. Champion assists, kills assists and epic monsters grant 40 gold and large monsters grant 10 bonus gold. I don't think that this really changes how people are going to feel about this item. You're going to build this if you're an AD jungler, although even a lot of them have recently stopped building this in favor of things like Ravenous Hydra. Like you have Jungle Lee Sin building Hydra instead of Spirit of the Elder Lizard or whatnot. I don't know if this is enough to get this item to be played. This item was way overpowered for much of Season 3 and it's been steadily nerfed. This is an attempt to buff it. I don't know if it's going to be successful though. You will get more gold from this item. That said, I'm not sure if it's enough, basically. Not sure about that. Ancient Golem, the default jungle item currently, at least at the end of Season 3, they are nerfing this. They're reducing the health. They're adding a passive to it. Conservation, gain a stack of conservation every 1.5 seconds. Lose stacks upon killing a large monster. So basically you get a passive bonus when you're not killing monsters, basically. So you're getting a stack, like stacks are building up passively, and you consume them when you kill a large monster. In other words, like the red buff or the blue buff or whatever. And you can get up to 80 stacks and up to 40 gold for a kill. So basically it's a way of getting more gold. That said, this is still probably the best jungling item out of the set. This is still probably your default go-to jungling item, even though it is getting nerfed in this patch. Spirit of the Spectral Wraith. Okay, let's see what they did here. New recipe, Spirit Stone plus Fiendish Codex, which is a little bit different. Plus 50 AP, 10% CDR, health and mana regen. Unique passive returns 8% of spell damage dealt to monsters as health and mana, so it gives you more sustain. Bounty Hunter passive that we mentioned before, and then unique passive damage dealt to monsters increased by 30%. This is a lot better. By the way, the item is also quite cheap, only 2,000 gold. This item's been buffed pretty sizably, in particular to give more sustain to AP junglers. So you Fiddlesticks first and foremost, but maybe somebody like Diana, if she's jungling, something like that, I could see. or just any AP jungler. This item is definitely better. Now, is it overpowered? I don't know. I need to see it in action, but this item is definitely better. And for a jungle fiddlesticks, this is looking pretty darn good right now. So, yeah, this definitely is the biggest buff to any of the jungle items. This is a nerf. Spirit of the Ancient Golems getting nerfed. Spirit of the Spectral Wraith getting buffed. It's not as good for solo laners, though. So, poor Vladimir / laning Nunu / Mordekaiser. It's not as good for them, but it is better for actual junglers. Okay. Other item changes. We keep going. This is, as I said, this video is going to be super long. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, but it's just humongous patch. Aegis of the Legion, new build path, Rejuve Bead, Cloth Armor, Ruby Crystal, Null Magic Mantle. Builds out of 4 things. That's actually kind of irritating. That's because the old Emblem of Valor is now removed from the game and replaced with Relic Shield. So that's why that is not a big deal. Banner of Command. This item is really different, and in fact this item feels like this might be overtuned. This might be too good. Fiendish Codex, Blasting Wand, 720 gold, total 2400 gold, 80 AP and 20% CDR. It's like, holy cow, this is an amazing support item. In particular, 20% CDR and 80 ability power for only 2400 gold, and you've got a unique aura on here too. Nearby allied minions deal 15% increased damage. By the way, you know who really likes this? Guess who gets bonus? Guess who has nearby allied minions? Support Annie. So Tibbers, 15% increased damage. How about Zyra? Her plants deal 15% increased damage. Yes, they both actually do function with Banner of Command. And you get this huge AP and cooldown reduction. And then finally, Promote. You even get an active. You can turn a nearby siege minion into a more powerful union and get all gold that unit earns. This item's really good. I don't know why this just kind of came out of left field. I feel like the numbers are off. This item should be more expensive for what it grants. I mean, keep in mind, a needlessly large rod in and of itself costs 1600 gold. And that's what? What is needlessly large? 80 ability power? So in exchange for 800 more gold, you're getting CDR, this allied minion aura, and the promote. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous to get all of that at such a cheap amount. So yeah, experiment with this. This item's really good. Really good. Other items updated. Mikhail's Crucible, they've changed this around just a little bit. Chalice of Harmony plus 720 gold, so it is actually cheaper than it was before. Magic Resist, MR per 5. Let's see, the Chalice, unique passive, and then of course the Cleanse on a 180-second cooldown. This item is great. It's actually cheaper than it was before, which is really good. So you can get Mikhail's easier and use it. If you're up against a heavy crowd control team comp, buy Mikhail's. Go for it. It's really useful. Heavy magic damage, heavy crowd control. If you see Jungle Fiddlesticks, grab this as a support and use it to counter whoever he fears in a team fight. Really important. Ohmwrecker still in a weird place. Ruby Crystal plus Blasting Wand, 350 health, 50 ability power, prevents nearby enemy turrets from attacking. I still don't think anyone will use this. It's in a weird place. And then talk about a weird place. Will the Ancients. Right, what did you do with this item? This is the weirdest build path for this item. Hextech Revolver, 2 Fairy Charms, and 440 gold. Grants ability power, mana regen, cooldown reduction, and spell vamp. Okay, here's the problem with Will of the Ancients. Who builds Will of the Ancients? What champions like to build this item? Vladimir, Katarina, Rumble sometimes, Mordekaiser. What do all those champions have in common? Well, none of them use mana. What did they make this item build out of? 2 Fairy Charms and 10 mana regen per 5. This build path makes no sense because the champions that commonly build Will of the Ancients, or Woda as we usually call it, are champions who don't have mana, are monolith champions. So this build path is utterly bizarre, and I can't imagine what they're thinking. So this item is, I just don't know what some of these champions are going to be building. If you're a Mordekaiser or whatever, like let's say you're a Mordekaiser, your core items build out of Hextech Revolver. Well, you can build Will of the Ancients, which has mana regen that you're not using. Or you can build, Spirit of the Spectral Wraith, which also has mana regen that you're not using. And this passive that only functions on monsters. All of this stuff only functions on monsters, which you're not farming because you're a laner, not a jungler. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with this, but the champions who rely on Hextech Revolver, like their itemization paths don't exist anymore unless you want Hextech Gunblade, and Katarina's about the only one who really wants that. So weird design decisions there. And then finally, Twin Shadows is fairly similar to what it was before. Amp Tome, Null Magic Mantle, ability power increased to 50 from 40. It's fairly similar to the way it was before. Not too much to say there. All right, vision, I'll just mention this briefly. Maybe we'll do a whole, probably we'll do a whole separate video just on vision and the trinket, so I don't want to talk too much about this. But sight wards are now called stealth wards. You can only place 3 wards per player. That's a hard cap. Building it doesn't matter whether placed with a sight stone or whatever. You can, each player, whatever reason, yawning here or what have you, each player can only put 3 wards on the map, plus 1 vision ward. You can only place 1 vision ward and 3 normal wards or stealth wards at once. You can see Sightstone no longer has their own restriction, but are restricted by your stealth ward cap. So that's obviously a huge change. And the pink wards, or vision wards, are not stealth anymore. You can see them at all point in time. They have 5 health, they last forever, they're cheaper, and yeah, so completely different. You can only have 1 on the map at a time. So very, very different. They're not stealth. Everyone can see the pink wards nowadays, but they do last forever, infinite duration, and they're cheaper. And they'll now keep track of your ward count. Anyway, what this means is vision has to be handled completely differently. No more supports running around, warding the entire map. No more, you can no longer have 35 wards on the map at once. Each player can only put 3 down. So that's a max of 15 and then 5 pinks overall. So quite a bit different. And it'll be fun to see how the competitive professional teams deal with that. But I don't want to say too much more because this is such a long video already. The trinkets, I will just briefly mention the trinkets. There are 3 trinkets that everyone can pick up. There is the warding totem, or never, excuse me. There's basically 3 choices here. Number 1, wards. You can put down a ward, puts a free stealth ward on the map, and then you can upgrade that for a longer duration. And at max rank, you can, when you upgrade this fully, you can get a stealth ward out of it if you want. But that's sort of the basic one, is you just get a ward, a free ward, basically. The second one is Scrying Orb. Reveals a location. This is basically a mini clairvoyance. Reveals a location within 1100 range for 1 second. Cast range increased to 2000 range. And then finally, cast range increased to 2500 range. That's the orb, the one, it's basically clairvoyance. And then Sweeping Lens disables and reveals any nearby hidden wards, traps, or devices for 4 seconds on a 180-second cooldown. Upgrade again, reveals any nearby wards, traps, or devices. What is it? The range is increased. And then finally, grants True Sight after activation on a 90-second cooldown, 600 range. Only the top tier, only the Oracle's Lens, the most highly upgraded one. This is the only one that reveals Stealth Champions. The other 2, the Lens, do not reveal Stealth Champions. So, a couple quick thoughts on how I see this working. Solo laners, take the free ward. You get a free ward. What else do you want? Just grab it. You get the free upgrade at level 9. Just take it. Take your free ward. Gives you more vision. Awesome. Not much more to say there. Supports. I think most supports want the Sweeping Lens. It's like a free pink ward. The ability to sweep out enemy wards. Like, what could be better than that? You're already going to be buying a Sightstone and buying wards as support. So getting 1 more free ward is kind of pointless if you're a support. Like, you're already getting wards from your Sightstone, so why would you get another ward from your trinket? Seems pointless. Get the Sweeping Lens. Then you can sweep out the other side's wards. That's way more useful. Junglers probably want this too. You're a jungler. You go to gank a lane, it's warded. You sweep out the ward, you come back. You're trying to do Dragon or Baron. You use it to sweep out the wards. You check to see if there's any wards, you remove them, and if they're there, you destroy them. So junglers, I think, want this. Junglers and supports want the Sweeping Lens. Most solo laners probably want the free ward, the warding totem. Who wants the Scrying Orb? Well, in my opinion, no one, because I think this stinks. The only context I can see for getting this is a support in late game in the team fighting phase when you want to be able to clairvoyance something. You want to be able to CV. Now, why do I think this is bad? Well, because the range. Look at this. 1100 range? That's terrible. That's nothing. That's like from the top of mid lane to the bottom of mid lane. You can't see anything. And it lasts for 1 second. 1 second. Clairvoyance lasts for 8 seconds. If anyone's familiar with using CV, it lasts for 8 seconds. This lasts for 1 second. It's not going to see anything. And even at max rank, it's only 2500 range. That's very short. I feel like this should be global range. I really do. Global range. Like, you can't even check Dragon or Baron unless you're right next to it. Practically, you pretty much have to be at blue buff to be able to check Baron. Like, this is just not a particularly long range. So I just don't think it's very good. In competitive play in late game, yes, I can see it then. But for most of the game, no. I mean, like, in bottom lane at the start of the game, does the support want this? No, it's pretty useless. Get the sweeping lens. And of course you can change. So maybe you know, as a support, maybe you start with the sweeping lens, and then when you get into late game, you swap over to Farsight Orb. You know, you swap over to the CV one. That's how I see these things working. Obviously, I'm theory crafting in a vacuum here, but those are my thoughts. Okay, finally, changes to Summoner's Rift. They have changed some of the brush around. They cleaned up brush configuration in a couple places. Top lane brush has been broken up into 3 smaller individual brush patches, but for some reason, bottom lane brush wasn't. Huh. Anyway, but basically they changed around the brush in some parts of the map. Changed it around a little bit. Let's see. Other stuff, other jungle changes. They have lowered the cooldown on Smite and reduced the damage. Reduced the damage that Smites does. So it's up more often, but it deals less damage early in the game. Jungle monsters now have levels, blah, blah, blah. Their monster level determines their HP, damage, and XP gold values. So they're introducing monster stuff in the jungle. Jungle monsters that grant 50%, They grant 50% bonus XP to lower level champions up to a cap. That's kind of nice. And here's the big one. Blue buff. The cooldown reduction granted by blue buff reduced from 20% down to 10%. That's a huge, huge change. Really big change. Probably justified because having blue buff advantage up on an opponent in mid is such an enormous edge. But yeah, cooldown reduction only 10% now, down from 20%. That's a big, big change. Anyway, jungle monster change. I'm not going to read through these. They've changed around what the camps look like, but this video is too long. And they added the new camp, the white camp. 1400 health, 75 attack damage, 15 armor, 60 gold, 150 experience. It is a single target camp, no smaller minions, designed to give junglers additional options. How this will play out, I'm not sure. It's too early to say. Map objectives, Dragon, they have changed it. So basically what they've done is they've made it so Dragon gives less gold early and then more gold late. So it's more valuable later in the game. You can see this. Dragon local XP 150 to 510 based on Dragon's level, divided between nearby allied champions. Global gold 125 to 260 based on Dragon's level. If the killing team is lower average level, Dragon grants bonus XP of 25%. And it's sharply increased for lowest levels of team, so supports will get more of this. Basically, the idea is the Dragon will grant less early in the game, more later in the game, so it's more of an objective. Late, after like the 30-minute mark, competitive teams pretty much just ignored Dragon because it wasn't very valuable. Now that will be less of the case, and it's more of a catch-up mechanism. If you're behind and you take Dragon, you get more out of it. So that's the basic idea. Changes to turrets, too. Turrets now, the outer towers now grant less global gold, grant 100 global gold per player, and 150 split amongst players who destroyed it. This is to stop, basically this is more for the competitive scene for 2v1 tower lane pushes. They didn't like the global gold going to people who were in other lanes. So anyway, outer towers now grant less global gold and grant some localized gold. And then the inner turrets are similar, but the inhibitor turrets are unchanged. Inhib turrets now grant 175 global gold per player. So anyway, as I explained that, let's see, base damage adjusted, so they're adjusting the damage to make last hitting under turrets more consistent. Global experience has been changed. Outer towers no longer give global experience when destroyed. Inhib turrets now give more global experience when destroyed. So again, this is more for the professional scene with fast 2v1 tower pushes. This, I think, might be one of the biggest changes in the whole patch, and I haven't seen anyone talking about this. Inhib turrets now are going to regenerate health. They have 15 health regen per 5. Yeah, the inhibitor turrets now are going to regenerate health. That's a huge change to this game, and no one is talking about this, which is weird. I'm kind of surprised that this has gotten so little attention, but yeah, inhib turrets will now regen health in the same way that Nexus turrets have always done. That's a really big change, and in particular, it's a nerf to split pushing, as it says. They don't like split pushing, but yeah. Now, you have to take the tower down, or eventually it will regen all the way back up to full. So yeah, that's a really big change. And I don't know what it means, other than the fact that split pushing is less effective. So yeah, that's a sizable change to how the gameplay works. Then finally, some other stuff. Inhib death timers reduced to 4 minutes from 5, so inhibitors respawn more quickly. No longer grant a global buff to all minions. Instead, grant a stronger damage and durability buff to minions in their specific lane. So no longer will all lanes push when it inhibits down just the lane that the inhibitor is in. And you know what? That actually makes logical sense. It probably should have been done that way back in the past. we will see what effect it actually has in play. But it should make it easier for teams to come back, basically. Should make it easier for teams that are behind to come back. Game flow, death timers, they have lowered the early game death timers, now start at 7.5 seconds from 12, and then scale up to the same value over the course of the game. Makes early death less punishing, again, to make early game deaths. Basically make it easier to come back from an early mistake. Minion experience, lane minions are no longer worth more experience based on game time, but they are still gain in gold and gain more statistics. Minions now have a level equal to the average level of champions in the game. Currently, this has no effect on the game, but will be expanded upon in the future. We'll see what that means. They have lowered the experience curve by roughly 10% to compensate for this, so minions aren't worth more experience over time. I don't know what effect that all means. Here's another huge change. Changes to bounty adjustments and assist bonus gold. Kills are only worth 60% of the base reward up to 2 minutes, and then that scales up to 100% at 4 minutes. What does that mean? If you kill someone immediately at the start of the game for first blood, like if you kill someone at the 1 minute mark, you're only getting 60% of the gold reward. So again, it's to make earlier deaths less punishing. I believe that what Riot's thinking of is some of the professional games where somebody dies at level 1 and like the game's over. The classic example is the Fnatic versus Cloud9 game. And in the World's playoffs, when Fnatic got a double kill at level 1, and the game was over. Like, the game was just over, because it was such a big advantage to get a double kill at level 1 that Cloud9 couldn't come back from that. So they're limiting the effects of early kills for that reason. And the same thing for assists. Assists are only worth 50% of the kill value before 20 minutes. But then they literally increase up to 80% at 35 minutes. It's like, wow, that's... Yeah, so again, assists are worth a lot more gold. Like, you get 80% of the kill value for an assist after the 35-minute mark. That's a lot of more gold. You know, a kill's in a vacuum, a kill's worth 300 gold if there's no spree. You get 80% of that now just for assisting. Whew, that's a lot of bonus gold. And then assist gets even more bonus gold here. If players have 2 more assists than kills, they earn 30 additional gold per assist. That caps at 60 gold, and it can't be worth more than the original value of the kill, but you can very easily reach the point where supports get equal value on an assist that the person who actually gets the kill gets. That's a pretty crazy deal. So assists are worth way, way more gold in Season 4 than they were in the past. If you're racking up a ton of assists, it's virtually like you're racking up a ton of kills. So that's a sizable change to gold income dynamics. What it actually does is it devalues last hitting, and it emphasizes roaming around in a team and getting assists and kills. So it actually devalues farming quite a bit, if you think about it. I mean, farming's still important, but it's devalued. Then finally, minion death spree reduction. Every 1,000 gold from minions monsters reduces your death spree by 1 death. This is basically to combat proxy farming Singed and proxy farming Tryndamere and champions like that. As it says, these are fairly destructive methods of playing the game. Basically, you'd make it so you were worthless in terms of gold, but you were still putting tons of pressure on the map. They are changing that, so you are, in fact, still worth gold if you're proxy farming, and I think that's a smart change. Then finally, masteries are updated. And there's an issue with Season 3 ranked loading borders. And no, I do not want to share this. Thanks. But anyway, so massive, massive patch. This video is at 1 hour and 20 minutes at about. They're just shy of that right now. So a massive patch. I tried to get through this as quickly. I still skipped over a lot of stuff. What I will try to do is put out more stuff later on when I have a better chance of it, specifically about the vision changes and about the trinket changes and more on the supports. Other people, you'll have to go to other people for the junglers. I do not main jungle. I can't speak to the jungle changes as effectively as some other people can. But I will try to talk in more detail about the support stuff once I have more of a chance to experiment, play around with it, and test some of the changes. But in any case, this video is long enough, so I'm going to cut it here. Once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this was informative. Until next time, see you guys later. Take care.